All right, we want to get to some more breaking news. District Attorney Nathan Hochman is getting ready to give us an update on the charges being filed in connection with the recent immigration protest.
We're also expected to hear from the U.S. Attorney. Let's listen in.
We will also have Los Angeles Police Department Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton. Also up here amongst us are representatives from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We have members from the District Attorney's Office, including our Charge Evaluation Division Deputy Head, or Head Deputy Alva Lynn, Deputy District Attorney Michael Blake of the Crimes Against Peace Officers Division. We are here to announce additional charges beyond the ones that we presented at our original press conference. In announcing these charges, I want to be crystal clear, as I am at every one of these conferences. Charges are not evidence. Every defendant we're going to be discussing is presumed innocent until and unless proven by legally admissible evidence beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. So if you hear us describing anything about a particular case, it is not evidence. These statements themselves will not be used in a court of law. Evidence will be presented to a judge or a jury in an appropriate time to convict someone beyond a reasonable doubt. So first, I'd like to start out with a thank you. I want to start out with a thank you because I think it's incredibly important to thank the hundreds of law enforcement officers that have come to Los Angeles at this important time, and to Los Angeles County. And it's not just the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, which has done incredible work, or the Los Angeles Police Department, or the California Highway Patrol. But we've also been joined by the ATF, and we have the special assistant in charge, the special agent in charge, Kenny Cooper from the ATF, who has joined us today. We've also been supported by the FBI. We've also been supported by 45 local law enforcement agencies throughout this county. It has been a tremendous amount of work to keep order, to allow protests to occur. Those protests have grown from hundreds of people to thousands of people to tens of thousands of people to hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm here to tell you that 99.99% of the people who protested did so lawfully, did so expressing their First Amendment rights, as is tradition in this country, voicing their thoughts, their opposition, their whatever to the government, as they are allowed to in this country. This right, we come to appreciate this right when we see it being denied in other countries. And we realize what an incredibly valuable constitutional right we have to protest against anything we find disagreeable in our system, but to do it absolutely lawfully. But what you'll hear, and I gave you this initial idea when we had our first press conference on it, Mr. Essayli gave additional thoughts with respect to the federal charges that have been brought. The LA City Attorney's Office has given her additional thoughts with city attorney charges that have been brought against a relatively small segment. And when I say relatively small segment of people who committed criminal violations, these are people for whom the protest was a cover. They weren't interested in protesting. They weren't interested in joining the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that wanted to legitimately voice their concerns about what's going on in society. This smaller group, which numbers probably in the hundreds, not even in the thousands, this group wanted to commit crimes. They looked at the protests as a cover, an opportunity to go ahead and ply their illegal trade and commit a whole variety of crimes that in many ways has done a huge disservice to the legitimate protesters out there. And what you're going to hear is that sometimes those legitimate protesters have reared up their heads and helped us identify these criminals, as well they should, because the media would only like to focus, quite candidly, on the fireworks being exploded, on the motorcycles running into law enforcement, on the incredible graffiti that is in many ways destroyed or certainly desecrated our historic buildings, on other situations, and you'll hear some of these additional charges being described today, of these few numbers of people who want to make it seem like Los Angeles is under siege. It is not. As I said before, 99.9% or 99% of people who protested did so legitimately, did so peacefully. And by the way, as a percentage of people in Los Angeles County, we have close to 11 million people in the county. 10% would be 1.1 million people. 1% is 110,000 people. We had 1/2 of the people in this county at most were protesting at all. So let's put that number back in context. 99.95% of people in this county didn't protest at all. Yet if you look at the media, the social media, the podcast, you would assume by their focus and their repeating over and over and over again of what's going on, that Los Angeles was a war zone, no different than some real war zones across this world. Nothing could be further from the truth. But we're going to announce additional charges today, both myself, Mr. Essayli, the CHP and the LAPD, to give you an idea of the types of crimes that have been committed and will absolutely be prosecuted. The first, I will announce 5 of them. Mr. Essayli will announce several others. The first one I want to focus on is by an individual named William Rubio. William Rubio is 23 years old. He has been charged with 2 felony counts of assault upon a police officer and 2 felony counts of using a destructive device to injure or destroy. Now let me describe the charges that have been alleged against Mr. Rubio. On the night of June 8th, there was a dumpster that was set on fire at 1st and Spring Street. Undercover officers observed Mr. Rubio allegedly throwing fireworks at the Los Angeles Fire Department and the Los Angeles Police Department personnel who responded to put the fire out. Mr. Rubio left the scene, but was spotted 30 minutes later, allegedly throwing fireworks at Los Angeles Police Department motor officers who were on a skirmish line. He was arrested, and when he was arrested, in his backpack, they found 20 individual fireworks. These included 11 M1000 quarter sticks. For anyone who understands fireworks, you have fireworks that range from the least explosive, an M80, an M100. These were 11 M1000 fire sticks, these quarter sticks. These quarter sticks are basically a quarter stick of dynamite. These are lethal devices, destructive devices. And had any of these been thrown in a person's direction, they very well could have killed or maimed that person. That was what Mr. Rubio was doing the night of June 8th, and Mr. Rubio was arrested. He was charged with these crimes, and if convicted as charged, Mr. Rubio faces up to 8 years and 8 months in prison. The second case involves Terrell Tillis, 30 years old. He's been charged with 1 felony count of possession of a firearm by a felon and 1 misdemeanor count of giving or receiving a large capacity magazine. On the night of June 11th, Mr. Tillis was in downtown Los Angeles, and he was detained for being out past a Los Angeles City mandated curfew. He allegedly had this loaded firearm with him that had 15 rounds in the magazine. If convicted as charged, Mr. Tillis is facing up to 6 years and 6 months in prison. Third defendant, Antonia De La Rosa, age 44. He's been charged with 1 felony count of discharging a laser at an aircraft. On the night of June 12th, Mr. De La Rosa has been alleged to be in the area of a protest in San Pedro. He allegedly pointed a green laser at a Los Angeles Police Department helicopter several times. If convicted as charged, he faces up to 3 years in prison. Fourth defendant, Eddie Lee Baldwin, age 39. He has been charged with 1 felony count of second-degree commercial burglary. On the night of June 9th, Mr. Baldwin is accused of being among many dozens of people who forced their way into an Apple store in downtown Los Angeles to loot that store. He faces up to 6 years in prison. And the fifth defendant is Adam Palermo. I will describe that case. Mr. Essayli will also describe the federal aspects of that case. Mr. Palermo, and he is featured in the video you have before you as well, was an individual who's 39 years old. He's been charged with 4 felony counts of assault with a deadly weapon on a peace officer, 1 felony count of arson, and 1 felony count of vandalism. On the night of June 8th, Mr. Palermo is accused of throwing a large rock at a California Highway Patrol vehicle from an overpass on the 101 freeway. He also allegedly lit an object on fire and threw it at a CHP SUV that was parked on the freeway. That vehicle caught fire. In this case, what you will hear is an anonymous tip from Crime Stoppers is what helped law enforcement identify, locate, and arrest Mr. Palermo. If convicted as charged on the state charges, he faces up to 9 years and 8 months in state prison. Mr. Palermo's case basically can be viewed in 3 different ways. Call it timing, techniques, and consequences. On timing, we have promised you that the charges are coming. And for anybody who's committed these crimes who wasn't arrested at that moment in time, we have told those folks that we are coming for you. And Mr. Palermo's case is an example of exactly that. That though he did not get arrested at that exact moment in time, you see behind me and throughout this entire county, law enforcement officers who are going to track down these criminals, arrest them, bring their cases to the U.S. attorney, to the district attorney, to the city attorney. We will then prosecute those cases, convict these individuals, and they will be punished. So on timing, the warning to all those criminals out there who've committed the crimes, we're coming after you. And to the people out there who are thinking about committing these crimes, please don't. Please heed this warning. The second thing is techniques. One of the things we discussed in the last press conference was how law enforcement is going to actually go ahead and find all these individuals. This exact case is an example of that. Crime Stoppers, 2 individuals contacted Crime Stoppers and provided anonymously information showing linking the social media sites for Mr. Palermo to the activities that were publicized by the media of an individual who was masked, who was throwing objects from the freeway onto the CHP cars. They followed up with these anonymous tips. They linked in all the social media video, all the video footage from the media, all the cell phone cameras that had been recording this. Hundreds or thousands of cameras have been out there. Law enforcement's going to get this evidence. And when they get this evidence, they're going to find these people behind these masks, behind these coverings, who thought they could go ahead and commit these crimes with impunity. Now they're going to realize something different. And the third point about the Palermo case and these other cases are the consequences. Mr. Palermo has basically said that he thought this was his most productive day. Literally, causing this damage, committing these crimes was his most productive day. What he's going to learn is that when we bring the evidence in court and we convict him beyond a reasonable doubt, and a judge sentences him to jail or prison, that he can think long and hard as he's sitting there in a jail or a prison about what a great productive day he had. It was not a productive day. It was a day of destruction, a day of violating the laws, and it will be eventually a day of accountability. Now let me turn this over to our United States Attorney, Bill Essayli.
Thank you, Mr. District Attorney. Good afternoon or good morning. I'm Bill Essayli. I'm the United States Attorney for the Central District of California. I am very proud to stand here today with our state and federal law enforcement partners. We are united in our efforts to ensure that individuals that choose to cause violence and destruction in our communities are held accountable. And you've seen us do that over the last week. And we're here today to continue doing that and to announce more charges. We have zero tolerance for violence, As the district attorney said, you have an absolute right to peacefully protest. You have no right to destroy property or to engage in acts of violence, especially at our law enforcement officers. Since June 6, 2025, my office, working with federal and state partners, have charged more than 20 individuals with federal crimes for engaging in violent conduct, obstructing enforcement operations, or supporting acts of violence. Let me highlight a few of the cases we filed over the last few days. On Friday, we took custody of Mr. Alejandro Orellana for his role in supporting the violent protest in downtown Los Angeles. On June 9th, he drove his truck downtown with an unidentified woman to hand out large quantities of face shields to individuals who appear to be engaged in violence and vandalism. He was not handing them out to peaceful protesters. His actions were captured on video, posted on social media, and observed by Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies. These face shields are designed to protect from chemical splashes and flying debris, which helps protect violent agitators from less than lethal weapons deployed by law enforcement. When the FBI executed a search warrant at his home, they found a powerful wrist rocket-style slingshot and ammunition for the slingshot, including a bag of rocks and containers of metal BBs, a can of spray paint, plastic goggles, and a notebook with the words 1312 Blue Lives Matter 187. 1312 is an abbreviation for All Cops Are Bastards, while 187 is a common slang term for murder. He has been charged with a violation of 18 United States Code Section 371, conspiracy to commit civil disorder, and 18 United States Code Sections 231A3 and 2, aiding and abetting in civil disorders. Each of those charges carries a 5-year statutory maximum sentence. As I mentioned last week, much of the violence has been directed at law enforcement, police officers who are just trying to do their jobs and protect the community. As you saw in the news, on June 8th, our highway patrol officers were violently and viciously attacked by individuals from an overpass above the 101 freeway, throwing rocks and explosive devices and lighting CHP cars on fire. On Friday, federal agents in the CHP arrested Mr. Adam Charles Palermo for his role in the attack on our CHP officers. Palermo was caught on video participating in the attack. His social media account contained a collage of photographs and videos depicting a man holding flying debris, a CHP patrol car on fire, and various other damage to CHP patrol cars. In the caption, he wrote, "All of the protests I've been involved in, which is well over 100 now, I'm most proud of what I did today." Mr. Palermo is charged with a violation of 18 United States Code Section 844I, attempted arson of a vehicle used in interstate or foreign commerce. He faces a mandatory minimum penalty of 5 years and a statutory maximum penalty of 20 years. He will not be doing any protests for the next foreseeable future. Another case filed yesterday involves an individual who spit on a military serviceman and a law enforcement officer. On Saturday, California National Guard and federal police were outside the federal building on Los Angeles Street trying to protect federal property. Angus Johnson confronted a California National Guardsman, and after heckling him, he spit on him. Johnson then spit on other federal police officers present who were trying to keep the peace. As our president said, if you spit, we hit, and we will hit you with a felony. Mr. Johnson is charged with assaulting a federal agent in violation of 18 United States Code Section 111. He faces a maximum sentence of 8 years in prison. We have dozens of ongoing investigations, and we are continuing our work to identify individuals who engaged in violence. Their masks, their face shields will not save them. We will find them, and we will go to their home, and we will arrest them. That is a promise I make to the community. I want to thank our law enforcement men and women. I want to thank our National Guard and the military for their service in keeping us safe. I want to thank the federal agents for their hard work, which they continue to do each and every day. They do not deserve to be treated the way in which they were the last week, and we're not going to put up with it. We have great working relationships with our local law enforcement partners, LAPD, the sheriffs, CHP, the district attorney's office, and we will work together to make sure we get the most aggressive and appropriate sentence for each of these violent actors. Thank you very much.
All right, you're listening to U.S. Attorney Bill Essayli. Also, we are listening to LA County DA Nathan Hochman talk about new charges in the immigration protest. These charges are new ones from the ones that we saw last week. And what's interesting is that it was social media. It was videos and pictures that they helped find these people. And, you know, a lot of the incidents that happened were assaults on police officer, throwing rocks at vehicles, breaking into Apple stores, throwing fireworks at the police officers. And what I found most interesting is that Hochman said, you know, 99% of the people protesting are doing it peacefully. It's that other 1%, 0.5%, that are, you know, making people look bad. And this is what we see in all protests. It's people that see this opportunity and, of course, proven until, you know, innocent until proven guilty, but we definitely saw the damage.
Exactly, and it was a wide range of people from ages as up to 44 years old, some in their 20s, and
some older ones up there.
Yeah, 44 years old, and one of the things that I really thought was interesting is that these suspects talked about being productive that day, that they were proud of what they were doing, and you know, these people were throwing rocks at CHP officers, fireworks, and really dangerous things that could really hurt someone. And again, we did also hear about the Angus Johnson who spit on officers. So they are, I think he said, if you spit, we hit with a charge. So
they're not holding back.
They are not holding back.
No.
And their warning was that if you do it, they will catch you. And so they are warning you not to do it. So certainly we're going to have much more on
sometimes
this.
you think it's just kids that are committing these heinous crimes, but people in their 40s, that's wild. And unfortunately, they're the ones that get all the attention for these protests. So, of course, we'll continue following that, but more to come for sure.